Well. After a decade of DC attempting to create and maintain a cinematic universe to rival the one from the MCU, it finally ends with Aquaman 2. I'll admit I have a love-hate relationship with DCEU. However, I can't say that I won't miss it after all this time. I basically grew up with it during my early teens and remember how exciting it was to have a, at the time, brand new DC film universe, which from the looks of the Man of Steel trailers had so much potential to compete with the MCU, which again at the time was firing on all cylinders with Phase 2 in 2013 as it was heading into its prime with Phase 3 later on. However, this isn't a video about the MCU, otherwise the video would have been twice as long and would have had me brain dead with the amount of MCU content that I would have need to watch in order to make that video. No, this video is all about the DCEU and a quick look into all the movies, as I think it would be appropriate considering that this is now the end of this infamous universe. By the way, I have not seen Peacemaker or Aquaman 2 yet, so those are gonna be I won't be talking about those. I want to rank these movies using the tier system, so at the very top you have the peak category, then below that it's gonna be alright I guess, then below that is gonna be the mid category, and lastly I would have sewer water tier, which is at the very bottom where all the trash movies will go. So first up is Man of Steel. Admittedly, I was so hyped to see Man of Steel back in 2013. The trailers made it seem like it was going to be one of the best movies of the year. Like, I feel like the Man of Steel trailers were the very first of many of kick-ass DC trailers that we would get in the upcoming years. Say what you will about their movies, but WB knows how to get your ass in the theater with their trailers. Anyways, the movie released and I got some issues. For the most part, the problems for me lie in how the film is structured. It feels more like an Alien First Contact / natural disaster movie rather than a Superman movie for me. When it came to the structure of Man of Steel, it felt like a movie of two halves. The first being the origin of Superman and him trying to deal with his place in humanity, and the second half being pure destruction porn. Clark himself doesn't really have a clear character arc. He starts the movie wanting to help people and ends the movie still wanting to help people. The only difference being that now he has a Superman suit rather than him being shirtless. The movie tries to show the duality of his human side with Jonathan Kent and his Kryptonian side with Jor-El, and making him choose between both of them. And while Clark ultimately chose the humans, there was never a point in the movie that reflects upon those ideals and tries to argue one or the other. It always felt like the movie knew which to choose and would just go in that direction. The action scenes are good, but it overstays its welcome, and I mean that because the second half again is all purely fighting and blowing shit up. The score is fantastic and maybe Hans Zimmer's best superhero score, but I still need to think about that though. His Batman and Spider-Man scores were actually pretty good, so yeah, I gotta think about that. Overall, it's decent, not terrible. I would put it in the it's alright category. Batman v Superman. This movie, alongside another superhero property, deals with two heroes coming together in a project and having their ideals clash in an epic showdown between both. One was successful critically and the other was met with critics and audiences alike panning it tremendously that it single-handedly caused the beginning of the end of their cinematic universe. Now, I don't need to say which one is which, however, there is a clear winner here between both. Daredevil Season 2. I mean, come on. The Punisher and Daredevil scene at the rooftop clears any scene in any of these two movies here, let's be honest. Okay, let me get back on track. Yes, BVS isn't very good. Yes, Hans Zimmer alongside Junkie and XL delivered yet again, and I think this might be Snyder's best looking movie yet, but the script and characters are what dragged this movie down completely. You have the title character Superman, whose movie was supposed to be a sequel to Man of Steel, somehow devolve into this versus movie, having Henry Cavill sit there and mope around for 2 hours, and having him say less lines than Spider-Man did in Civil War. Doomsday looks terrible. Wonder Woman is just there to promote her movie. Batman, the world's greatest detective, for some reason couldn't figure out that Lex Luthor was the bad guy, but somehow Lois Lane did. Speaking of Lex Luthor,
and you'll live forever. You'll be able to see it all.
Is that my purpose? Simply to be a witness?
We create our own purpose in life. Now go create yours.
True!
No. No, what am I?
Boys! Ow! Wow!
Yes, I would.
yeah, I'm sorry, but I have to put this movie in the sewer water territory. Next up is Suicide Squad. It was shit. One of the worst movies I've ever seen. Nothing about this movie works. The script was awful, the characters were terrible, the score is non-existent, the movie looks ugly with this piss yellow filter it constantly has, the villain is laughable, and it's not even funny in a it's so bad it's good type of way like other bad movies are. It's just boring. Jared Leto as Joker is one of the worst performances that I've ever seen in a comic book movie. It's worse than Morbius, I'm not kidding. This is going in sewer water, I don't care. You know, in fact, I was inclined to actually make a separate tier for this film alone, but no, I'm not gonna do that. Next up is Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman came out in the best possible time, especially after the year DC had in 2016. It brought back some much needed good faith in DC movies after all this time and showed audiences that they weren't dead altogether just yet. It came out and everyone was crying over how good it was, and it gave the most iconic female superhero her time to shine. However, while I think the movie is good, I don't think it's great. This movie had so much potential but was butchered only because the third act was so mediocre. Wonder Woman could have really delved deep into the topic of war and how we as people are part of the reason why wars continue to happen. The movie had a great idea with Diana trying to stop Ludendorff, who she thought was the god of war, and went out of his ways to show that just because she killed him, who she thought again was the god of war, was going to stop us from killing each other, which that was complete buffoonery. But the movie then could have continued going in that direction, which would have made it a lot more interesting. You know, the fact that us as humans are the reason that war continues to happen. Like, it's never gonna stop because it's not a black and white situation. Instead, the real Ares comes into the scene, and him and Wonder Woman both have a CGI explosion battle that goes on until Wonder Woman says love will always win or whatever, and that's the end of the fight. It's a good movie that could have been so much better, and while it did help DC back in 2017, I don't think the movie stood the test of time. I don't really hear it getting talked much about it either. I'm gonna put this in the alright I guess tier. Now on to the big one, Justice League 2017. I don't think there's a soul on this planet who liked this movie. Not even DC fans acknowledge this film, especially now after Snyder Cut was released back in 2021. This doesn't even feel like a movie, rather a Frankenstein of visions from two directors with completely different styles trying to make something for WB investors to be happy enough to release in theaters for profit. It's ugly on every level. The writing is ass. You can tell all the scenes have been reshot and offer worse acting than what was shown in the trailers. This movie, I'm gonna be honest, it's complete sewer water. It's terrible. It's awful. There isn't any controversy with this opinion. I'm sure all of you guys are gonna agree, so let's just move on. Next up is Aquaman. You know, I like this movie. Nope, this movie isn't a masterpiece, but you can't help but have fun when watching this movie. The action is the best in the DCEU, I think. James Wan knew exactly how to move the camera to get some of these shots in. It's funny when it wants to be, but it never overstays its welcome with its gags. The shots are nicely done, especially during the trench scene in the ocean. Overall, this movie's harmless. It's a turn off your brain and munch on your popcorn type of movie, and I can't sit here and say that's a bad thing. I'm gonna put this in the peak category, just because of how fun it is. Shazam is a good movie. It is safe, yes, but it has a lot of heart. The cast does a great job. The villain works good enough, but unmemorable. I mean, I don't even remember his name. Dr. something, I think he's a doctor, right? It isn't as fun as Aquaman, but it is better written and has a character arc for Billy that was emotional, especially that scene he has with his mother right around the third act. So yeah, I can't really say much about this movie, as I'll be honest, I haven't seen it in a while and I forgot a lot about it, but I do remember liking it very much. And yeah, I'm gonna put this in the peak category. I think this is that good. Birds of Prey is mid. I like Harley in this movie, but I'll be honest, I think at this point I was kind of getting tired of her as a character. I like Black Mask, and that he was pretty much the best part of the film. That's about it. Honestly, nothing about this movie stood out for me, so you know, and I honestly forgot it even existed until I had to rewatch parts of it again. It was just forgettable. This movie had every bad thing going for it. This movie was at the burden of a worldwide pandemic, where at the time no one had any interest in going to the movie theaters. It had to be released alongside it on HBO Max, meaning there was absolutely no incentive to even pay for a ticket when you could just watch it at home if you really wanted to. And the movie was also trashed by fans and critics alike, some even making reference to Batman and Robin when it came to how goofy and campy the movie was, especially compared to the original. I don't know what to tell you, but all the charm the original movie had was completely lost here. The story is nonsensical. Gal Gadot tries her best, but her acting isn't good enough to make me care about her character. I sometimes forget that Cheetah isn't even in this movie with how little they do with her here. She feels like a worse version of Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The best part really is Pedro Pascal as Maxwell Lord, and he was the only great thing to come out of this movie. 1984, from top to bottom, just doesn't work. It's sewer water. Zack Snyder's Justice League. I liked it. It isn't a top 10 comic book movie, I know that, but it's by far Snyder's best DC work, which is ironic considering that this version of the movie is the one that WB was trying so hard to keep away from public viewing, and only changed their minds after the whole release the Snyder Cut movement practically forced WB to finish it. The movie is far from perfect though, as there's plenty of script and plot issues. For example, Darkseid and Steppenwolf are about as interesting here as a pack of dirt. Not to mention Darkseid has no real presence as the big bad the movie so desperately tries to portray. Like the first time we see him, it was in a flashback where he essentially gets his ass handed to him so bad that he needed to drag his ass back to the ship, and for some reason they made him forget that the only planet in the universe where all the 3 mother boxes were located in was on Earth. This movie is all spectacle, however it does its emotional scenes really well, though thinking about long enough can raise some questions. Like for example, the Flash scene was absolutely fantastic on its surface, but when you delve deeper into the Speed Force and how it's presented in the movie, it loses its impact as nothing really happens to Barry when he tries to save the world. It makes you question whether or not the Speed Force is just a massive cheat code to fabricate an emotional response to the audience. Like I thought going into the Speed Force would have costed his life. I think, isn't that something that was said in the film? I don't know, they presented it as the Flash sacrificing himself for the world, and I guess nothing really happens to him. He just gets tired for a bit and then the movie carries on. Overall, the movie's still a win for not just Snyder but for the fans who have been shouting for years to get this version released. So I'm gonna put it in the P category. The Suicide Squad. James Gunn has been consistently putting out great superhero content for the better part of a decade now. The Suicide Squad is the exact opposite of everything that the 2016 version is. This time, the movie had a great cast of characters with different personalities, motives, backgrounds, and style. Speaking of style, the movie is filled to the brim with it. Not only that, but the movie actually holds its title with weight, as, spoiler for anyone who still hasn't seen the movie yet, the first 5 to 10 minutes, the movie literally kills off the entire team that was marketed in the trailers. This movie is insane, but the Suicide Squad isn't also just fun and crazy, but it also knows how to take itself seriously when the story demands it. It just works on every level, and so far it is the best movie out of the DCEU so far. Black Adam. So you'll like this movie for the action, the VFX explosions, and the fights. The story, however, it's whatever. Basically, everything that consists of Black Adam fighting or the Justice Society of America is enjoyable and will pass the time. The kid is annoying, I didn't like him at all, but Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate was a standout for me. I love magic type superheroes as you have the ability to do some creative shit in fights. This feels like every other Rock movie, to be honest, where he comes out as the badass. It's a movie where you can turn your brain off and just see crazy shit happen on the screen. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This movie and Black Adam came out within months of each other and had absolutely nothing to do with one another. The kid who plays Freddy is a standout of this movie, not to mention the actor who plays Billy does a fantastic job with the script he has been given and the little time he's been in the movie. The main problem is that this movie is so generic. It's not even that funny either. Like, they try, but most of the comedy here just lands flat. Also, Wonder Woman shows up, but after the announcement that the DCU was ending, it didn't land an impact on me at all. Plus, I'm sorry, but that theme has kind of devolved into meme status with just how often it's used every time she shows up. Generic is one word I would use to describe this movie. It's safe, harmless, but overall, after a day you'd probably forget that this movie even existed. It's pretty mid. The Flash. My friends and I were extremely hyped for this movie. The return of Michael Keaton as Batman was exciting. Ben Affleck returning as his last appearance as Bruce Wayne and Batman was also something to look forward to, even if it was for the opening act of the movie. The movie also had lots of potential to be great, and overall I had a good time with it. However, the biggest issue was that this movie felt like wasted potential. The Flash was ultimately set up to fail when it was announced that they were doing a Flashpoint adaptation to fix the already broken cinematic universe, which was made worse when James Gunn was announced to reboot the DC movie universe. So what we're left now with is a movie trying to fix the problems of a universe that was already ending and try to use Michael Keaton returning as Batman to hype up the general audience. The CGI was ultimately inconsistent. Sometimes it was good, but most of the times it looked like this. What's sad is that this movie, when it wants to, can actually work. For example, when they go for the emotional scenes, they work extremely well, like when Barry sees his mom for the final time. The Flash isn't the worst superhero movie ever made like some of the people were saying. Overall, this movie was a mixed bag. Aquaman 2, unfortunately I still haven't seen it yet, but I got a friend who has seen it and this is what he thinks of the movie.
That shit was boof. It was literally like the motherfuckers at Cole Park in the drama program can make a better fucking movie, bro. Like, that shit was so bad.
I don't think we're ever going to forget the DCEU. No matter what you think about it, whether it was good or bad, it was part of the nerd culture and had some of the most infamous and interesting stories to come out of WB and Hollywood in general. And I hope that they have grown from it, and now that the DCU is on the horizon, we can get a better movie universe from it. You can see the potential this universe had, and I felt like had they gone in a completely different direction with Batman v Superman, I don't think we would have needed a reboot in the first place. But screw it, it's over. Alright, that's enough. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know whether you guys disagree or agree with any of my opinions of whatever DC movies that I've talked about, and I'll see you guys. Well, I know by the time this video comes out will probably be the new year, so yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.